Can you able to see, sir? Hello. 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 Hello.
Hello.
Sivakumar, sir.
Sir, wait, sir.
Okay. Is the screen visible, sir?
Hello, sir.
Is the screen visible, sir?
Visible, sir. Visible, sir. Kindly press the F5 button, sir. Yes, sir. Heavy wind sound is hearing, sir.
From my side, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now, sir?
Yes, sir. Somewhat of some sort of heavy wind blow sound is hearing. Anyway, sir.
Okay. Check.
ரொம்ப இறையுது இல்ல அதனால கேட்டு பாருங்க சவுண்ட் இருக்கா எதனால ஹலோ ஃபேனா
Can I check now, sir?
Yes, sir. I hope so. You are sitting below the fan. I hope so. The sound is what?
Okay. Wait.
Yes. Okay, fine.
Now, sir?
Now it's clear, sir. Clearly audible your voice.
Okay, sir.
Uh, yes. Ganesh sir, let me wait for another 5 more minutes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sure.
Very good morning, sir. Am I audible? Yes, sir. Okay. Good morning, sir. On behalf of Ramco Institute of Technology, Department of Mechanical Engineering, it's my immense pleasure to welcome all the participants for a fifth day webinar on ME 8651 Design of Transmission Systems Overview. It is an initiative by our design faculty members. It's my immense pleasure and honor to welcome our today's chief guest, Dr. R. Ganesh. Dr. R. Ganesh completed his BE from University of Madras in the year 2003, pursued his ME degree from Anna University in the year 2009. He pursued his PhD from Anna University in the year 2014. So from BE, ME, PhD, all he is a gold medalist. His specialization is materials and manufacturing technology. Currently, he is working as an associate professor. His experience, he started his career from Jaya Institute of Technology, formerly known as NCR College of Engineering and Technology, in the year 2004 to 6. Later, he joined in RMK Engineering College. Around 8 years he spent. Later, he associated himself in Velamal Engineering College in the year 2015. His area of interest, lightweight composite and nano composite materials, tribology in metal matrix composites, and soft computing techniques in manufacturing process. He is the mentor for sponsored research, Smart Blower Unit for cars, worth of 2,50,000. It's an ongoing. And then his academic research, he is supervising 2 PhD scholars. He published so far 8 journal publications from reputed journals, and then 30 conferences he participated and presented a paper. And he actively involved himself in attending workshops, seminars, FTPs, and he gave invited lectures to the reputed colleges. And he published a book, a textbook on engineering mechanics also, and he is an active member of SAE. With these few words, I am very happy, and it's my immense pleasure to welcome Dr. R. Ganesh, sir. Welcome, sir. Please share yours.
Good morning to all. Can you all hear me? Hello.
Hi, sir, your voice is audible, sir.
Good morning to all. I would like to thank Dr. Sivakumar, who recommended me to give a lecture on this webinar on design of transmission systems. And my special thanks to the management and faculty members of Department of Mechanical Engineering, Ramco Institute of Technology, who given me the opportunity to present my speech on design of shoe brakes as one of the part in this webinar. Thank you so much. Is my screen visible, sir?
Yes, sir, your screen is visible, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, sir.
My topic is design of shoe brakes, which we are going to discuss today. So before entering into the design aspects of shoe brakes or block brakes, let me have a small introduction on what is brakes and what are the things we have to consider before going to the design of complete shoe brake systems. What is the definition for a brake? It is a mechanical device which is used to absorb energy possessed by either a moving system or a stationary system. So that's what I highlighted there. It can able to absorb either kinetic energy or potential energy. For example, if it is a moving system, it is going to absorb kinetic energy. If it is a stationary system where we need to hold any objects in a particular position, then the energy which comes into the picture is potential energy. So the brake system is a mechanical device used to absorb either kinetic or potential, which is possessed by a moving system or by mechanism. any mechanism, stationary mechanisms, purely by means of friction. So here the energy absorption takes place purely by means of friction. And these are the examples what I have listed here: automobiles, machine tools, hoist, elevators. From the examples, it's clear that when you take automobiles, it's a kinetic energy. Machines, it's a kinetic energy. Hoist and elevators refers to the potential energy, what the braking system is going to absorb. And there are many modes of operating braking systems. You can apply mechanical force, you can apply magnetic force via electrical systems, or you can apply hydraulic pressures through hydraulic systems. So though there are many modes of operation, we are going to restrict ourselves in this seminar only mechanical braking systems. And for any braking system, and there are some 4 important factors which I have listed here, which contributes the effective braking capacity for the system. The first one is the pressure intensity between the braking surfaces. Pressure intensity, again, it depends on 2 things. How much amount of normal reactive force is acting on the brake shoe, to what area it is going to spread uniformly. So whether it's going to concentrate on a single point or whether it's going to spread over the entire braking surface. So that again gives the clarity on how much braking capacity it can able to do effectively. So that's the first important point what we should consider in the design. So what's the pressure intensity between the braking surfaces? That is between brake drum and the brake shoe. Second one is the radius of brake drum, which is directly proportional to the amount of torque, braking torque. Third one is the coefficient of friction of the brake lining. So again, what I told in the beginning, that the entire braking system is going to absorb the energy purely by means of friction. The material what we use for the brake should have a high coefficient of friction, which can able to offer the sufficient amount of frictional force during the braking action. So the material should be selected in a proper manner, which can able to offer the correct amount of coefficient of friction to offer correct amount of frictional force. It should not get disturb or degrade itself by means of external factors such as moisture or any toxic environment or acidity, chemical environments like that. Then the last factor which contributes to the brake capacity is the ability of heat dissipation. Since the entire amount of energy absorbed in braking system is by means of friction, definitely there is a chance of producing more amount of heat, and that heat we should not let it accumulated in the system itself. We have to take it and remove as quick as possible. So we should provide a proper system, the braking system, to dissipate the heat quickly and correct amount of quantity. So since we are going to restrict only to mechanical braking systems, let me introduce on mechanical brakes. So mechanical brakes, of course, the action is going to take place purely by means of mechanical force what we apply, which is called as either actuating force or effort. Again, due to the direction of this actuating force, we can classify into 2 things. One is radial brakes and axial brakes. So radial brakes are the conventional brakes what we see in many applications from early days in automobiles, machine tools, starting from a bicycle, 2-wheelers, 4-wheelers, heavy vehicles, including trains, etc., machine tools. Axial brakes or the disc brakes. So from the name itself, it's very clear that if the actuating force is going to act radially to the brake drum, it is called radial brakes. And if it's going to act parallel to the axis of the brake drum, it is called axial brakes. Any axial brakes, it is not going to act collinearly to the axis, away from the axis, but it will be parallel to the axis. Then, as we already discussed, the brake lining material should contribute and should offer a correct amount of coefficient of friction in order to have an effective braking action. So in keeping that in mind, what are the features that should get satisfied by a brake lining material? The first one is that it should offer high coefficient of friction without minimum fading. It should not get fade. The fade, in the sense, in the later slides, I will explain in detail about the fade. So it should not lose its property and it should not lose its contribution over the coefficient of friction, so that the braking action will become ineffective when it's going to fade. And then it should not get worn out easily. So it should have low wear rate. and it should have a high amount of strength to offer a rigid support between the shoe and the lever during braking action. It should not get deteriorate or leave from the system, and it should have high heat resistance, and it should have very low thermal coefficient of expansion, because this factor, the low thermal coefficient of expansion, because due to high amount of heat generated in the braking action by means of friction, if the material is going to have a high coefficient of expansion, it expands, and that leads to geometrical changes, again, which leads to imbalance and losing its rigidity between the lever and the brake shoe. So that's the point which I insisted. And some examples also I have listed here: cast iron, bronze, leather, asbestos fiber, etc., which is normally used in the real-time applications of brake system. In this slide, you can able to see clearly the fading in braking systems. This particular chart I have taken from the website I have given there. So in this chart, you can see three different materials. A, B, C refers to different brake lining materials. For different brake lining materials, with operating temperature increases, the coefficient of friction slightly increases in the beginning stage, but later, if you see, once it crosses the critical temperature, gradually it starts decreasing. So that decreasing of coefficient of friction with respect to increase in operating temperature, that phenomenon only we call it as fade. And while designing a braking system, once you select the brake lining material for that particular braking system, you should be able to concentrate on this fading aspect also, so that the operating temperature can be limited without losing its property. Now, actually coming to the topics, since the topic given is design of shoe brakes, I will be discussing on three types of shoe brakes. One is single shoe external braking system, double shoe external braking system, and the last one is internal shoe expanding braking system. So let me give a small introduction on a single shoe external braking system. The diagram is, I think it's clear to you. This single shoe braking system have three important components. One is the brake drum having the radius capital R. Second one is this brake shoe or block. This cross lines indicates the brake lining, which is in contact with the brake drum. The third component is this lever. This is the fulcrum point, and this capital P refers to the actuating force or the effort what we apply for the braking action. And these three distances, it should be very clear while solving the design problems on braking system. One is distance between the fulcrum point and the axis of the brake drum, which is A. And B refers to distance between the fulcrum point and the line of action of actuating force. C refers to the distance between the fulcrum point and the line of action of friction force. So since friction force is a tangential force which is going to act in the contact between the drum and the brake lining, between this tangential force and the fulcrum point is the distance C. So these three distances will tell you whether the braking action is effective or not. That we will see in the forthcoming slides. So this is an example what I have shown here. It's a braking shoe in a train. This is the shoe, and this 2 theta is the angle of the shoe, which is called as included angle of the shoe. Again, this 2 theta plays a vital role in the design of braking systems, because up to certain degree, for example, say for 45 degree, maximum up to 45 degree, the pressure intensity will be uniformly spreaded over the brake shoe, and the normal reaction can be exactly concentrated on the midpoint of the brake shoe. And this condition will not be valid enough when the 2 theta value goes beyond 45 degree, which we normally called as a single shoe or long shoe. So single shoe in the sense the 2 theta is up to 45 degree. When it goes more than 45 degree, we sometimes call it as a longer shoe. In longer shoe, this assumption is no more valid. That is the uniform distribution of pressure intensity or normal reaction concentrating on the midpoint of the brake shoe, all those things. But normally to compensate that issues, we will slightly increase the coefficient of friction. So which we calculate by means of an empirical equation, which I will discuss in the next slides. So that is the point what we should consider regarding this 2 theta. So then the design aspects of braking shoe, there are some 3 important assumptions what normally we make. One is the shoe is attached to the lever rigidly, there is no imbalance. Second one is the pressure intensity is uniform. Third one is the rotation of brake drum is clockwise. And this is a free body diagram based on the assumption clockwise rotation of the drum. So in this free body diagram, I think it's clear with the forces what act on the system. This capital N refers to the normal reaction force. Mu is the coefficient of friction. This mu into N is the frictional force, which is the tangential force acting in the contact between the brake drum and the brake shoe. And already I told you about the distances A, B, and C. This capital P refers to the actuating force. This Rx, Ry are the reactions in this pivot point or the fulcrum point. And this L and W is the dimensions of the shoe, length of the shoe and width of the shoe. Normally this length of the shoe, this refers to length of the shoe, which we normally calculate a trigonometric relation of R into the included angle 2 theta, R into 2 theta. So leaving the sine term being the value is very less. So that is the relation what we use to calculate the area of the shoe, L into W. That L refers to capital R into 2 theta, angle included for the brake shoe. Now based on this free body diagram, when you take moment for all the forces about this fulcrum point, the first force is the P into this distance B. Here I am taking a positive sign for the anti-clockwise moment and negative sign for the clockwise moment. It can be in inverse also, that is up to you, but you can change the signs accordingly. One can be positive, one can be negative. It is not going to affect the results. So P into B is the anti-clockwise moment. Then the second force is the normal reaction force, this N into A. So since it is a clockwise moment, I have kept a negative sign, plus this mu into N, frictional force, mu into N into this perpendicular distance C. Again, this is anti-clockwise moment with respect to this fulcrum point O. So 2 anti-clockwise moments positive and 1 clockwise moment negative. The equation is P into B minus N into A plus mu N into C equal to 0. Now, there are 3 important cases as a corollary you can see for a single shoe braking system. What happens when the distances A, B, and C for different braking systems? When you see here, the first case, which is called self-energizing brake, A is greater than mu into C. So in this term, if you take N into A on one side, P into B plus mu N into C on another side, and if you satisfy this condition, A greater than mu C, the frictional force helps to reduce the magnitude of actuating force. That means when this condition gets satisfied, A greater than mu C, less amount of actuating force or effort is enough in order to give the correct amount of braking action. So that is called self-energizing braking action, which is one of the most desirable case in any braking system. Because normally if the entire braking action is done with the help of less effort what we apply, definitely we are going to appreciate that. Coming for case 2 and case 3, if you see, when the condition A equal to mu C is satisfied, or A lesser than mu into C gets satisfied, the second case, no actuating forces required for braking action, which is not desirable at all. Because whatever the braking system, whether it is for an automobile or for a machine tool or for any application in such case, control should be in our hands. So if at all no actuating force is required for braking action, means it is not a desirable case. We should not allow it to go for self-locking conditions. And third one is uncontrolled braking and grabbing conditions where the actuating force is negative, which is again a not desirable case. So while designing a braking system for any application in the geometrical wise, while selecting the distances A, B, and C, and after selecting the correct brake lining materials, you should check this condition, whether this condition is getting satisfied or not. A greater than mu into C. Normally in the design, certain things what we calculate in any braking system. The first one is the braking torque. Braking torque, of course, we all know it's the frictional force multiplied by the radius of the brake drum. Frictional force is mu into n. Mu is the coefficient of friction, and n refers to the normal reaction. Mu n into capital R. And second one is the dimensions of the brake shoe. Pressure intensity equal to normal reaction divided by the cross-sectional area. So P equal to N divided by L into W. This L only I told, the length of the shoe can be calculated by radius of the brake drum multiplied by the 2 theta. L R into 2 theta, included angle of the brake shoe. The third item is heat generated during braking action. Heat generated equal to frictional force multiplied by the average velocity. Average velocity, that is the initial velocity plus final velocity divided by 2. Sometimes the final velocity can be either 0 or it can be some velocity, because the braking action can be either to reduce the speed of the system or to stop the system. When it stops the system, the final velocity becomes 0. When it's reducing the speed of the system, you will have some value for the final velocity. So you will take average velocity and multiply by the frictional force. We will get how much amount of heat that is generated during braking action. And now comes the note. What I told earlier, there are two types of shoes. One is short, another one is long. So when the included angle of the brake shoe goes beyond 45 degree, we call it as long shoe. For that long shoe, no more the condition where pressure intensity is uniformly acting on the entire brake shoe is valid. That since it's a long shoe, both the sides of the shoe with respect to midpoint will have sliding surfaces, curved surfaces, of course. And these two curved surfaces on both the sides of the midpoint leads to sliding action that offers more amount of frictional force. So normally we would have studied in engineering mechanics under the title friction. Sliding, that wedge friction or the inclined friction is the one of the most offered frictional force in the friction systems. So those wedge friction concept will come into the picture when it goes for long shoe. Let me explain with this diagram. See here. So when this 2 theta goes beyond 45 degree, we call it as long shoe. About this midpoint on upper side as well as lower side, if you see, you will have more amount of curvature. This curvature will offer some sort of an additional wedge friction, inclined friction, and that will slightly increase the coefficient of friction. So how much amount of coefficient of friction is increased, that you can calculate by means of this empirical formula. Mu dash equal to mu into 4 sine theta divided by 2 theta plus sine 2 theta. When mu is, for example, say 0.2 or 0.3, when you substitute in this formula, you will get a mu dash, that is equivalent coefficient of friction, slightly higher than the original coefficient of friction. That means it takes care of all those inclined surfaces on either side of the midpoint, and which takes account into both tangential forces and normal forces of the friction force, which slightly increases the value of coefficient of friction. And once you calculate this equivalent coefficient of friction, the condition goes invalid. The pressure is not going to act or concentrate on the midpoint. It is going to distribute uniformly on the entire surface. Coming for the next shoe, that is a double shoe external braking system. So here you can see the same type of arrangement will be there. So this is the lever, and this is the brake shoe, and this is the brake drum. So exactly in case of a single shoe external braking system, you would have seen one half of this. So you will have two half. One is on the left, another one is on the right. You will have two levers, two brake shoes. Sorry. Two brake shoes, one on the left, one on the right. And you'll have two fulcrum points or two pivot ends. And this represents the actuating force or effort what we apply for the braking action. So this diagram I have taken from one example problem. That's why it has some dimensions. But you can omit that and you can see the structure of the braking system alone. And this is a real-time example what I've given here. You can see two external braking shoes on either side in the train. So in a single shoe external braking system, normally we calculate torque equal to frictional force multiplied by radius of the brake drum. So here it's a double shoe braking system. So here we'll have two reaction forces and two frictional forces on the left as well as on the right shoe. So here the torque will be summation of torque on the left and torque on the right. So frictional force on the left and frictional force on the right. And this is the free body diagram, which is very simple, but it is given in detailed manner. I think you don't need to confuse with this. So this is a lever which is having this actuating force, capital P, and these are the two fulcrum points. Any fulcrum point or pivot point will have two reactions. One is horizontal reaction and vertical reaction. So this point A has RVA, RHA. This point B has two reactions, RVB and RHB. Again, it's the left side lever and right side lever. So left side lever, since it's the point A, we have two reactions. This is the point E. And since it is a fixed end, reactions are not given here. And this is the right side lever. Again, this point C has two reactions. Point B, C is a short lever which is connecting the left side and right side levers. So again, two reactions are given. And this is the brake drum. This is the left side brake shoe. This is the right side brake shoe. This is the normal reaction acting on the left shoe, NL. This is normal reaction acting on the right shoe, NR. And this mu into NR and mu into NL represents the corresponding frictional forces or tangential forces acting on the contact between the shoe and the drum. So whatever we see in the single shoe braking system, exactly the concepts remains the same, but it is two times, one for left, another one is for right. So from this free body diagram, I think you can apply basic fundamental concepts of equilibrium. Summation of all horizontal forces equal to 0. Summation of all vertical forces equal to 0. Summation of all moments equal to 0 about a particular fulcrum point. So using these three conditions, you can apply for each and every component. You can apply it separately for this lever DAB. You can apply for the lever BC. You can apply for the lever AE and CF. By applying all these equilibrium conditions, once again I list out: summation of horizontal forces equal to 0, summation of vertical forces equal to 0, and the last one is summation of moment equal to 0. By applying these three equilibrium conditions, you can able to solve and find all the reactions. That's what I given here. So using equilibrium of forces and moments, all the reactive forces and normal reactions can be determined. And here the total braking torque is given by T equal to mu into sum of the two normal reactions. One for left, another one is for right, multiplied by R. In case of single shoe external braking system, instead of two normal reactions, you will have only one normal reaction. That's the difference. And dimensions of the shoe, as usual, what we did in single shoe external braking system, same concept you can apply here. The pressure intensity equal to normal reaction divided by the cross-sectional area. Cross-sectional area is again L into W. L is again R into 2 theta. While taking the normal reaction, here you have to take the maximum normal reaction, whether it is for the left shoe or for right shoe. So once you calculate the dimensions of the shoe based on maximum normal reaction, the design will be safe. Coming for the last type of shoe brake system, that is internal expanding shoe brake. The internal expanding shoe brake means, here you can see the diagram. So this is the brake drum. The brake drum is rotating either clockwise or anti-clockwise in such case. And this is the brake lining. And here you will have two shoe. This is left and this is right. And this is a hydraulic cylinder and this is the return spring. So this hydraulic cylinder only I have shown here. So when you apply the brake pedal, it operates the master cylinder. From that master cylinder, the hydraulic pressure goes here and divides the left and right. So here this brake shoe gets expanded and then contacts this brake drum. So that's why it is called as internal expanding shoe brake system. I think now it's clear with the help of this diagram. And here during the running condition, when you apply this hydraulic pressure and it goes to the left side shoe and the right side shoe, one thing you should keep it in mind, the amount of actuating force what is applied on the left shoe and right shoe, definitely it will not be equal. If it's a stationary system, definitely it will be equal. The same systematic arrangement without having the rotation of the brake drum, and you apply the hydraulic pressure and which divides equally on the left side and right side, the amount of force offered will be the same, because there is no change in dimensions, there is no change in the distance which the hydraulic pressure travels. But in case of moving system, either clockwise or anti-clockwise, again depending on the direction, the amount of actuating force offered from this master cylinder will going to vary. So that I will explain in the coming slides. Here you can see, so this is the center of the brake drum. For example, let us take a point here. This point is where the pressure intensity is going to concentrate, and this is a normal reaction. So since I'm going to take arbitrarily a small point, I represented by dn. So this dn is a normal reaction, and this mu dn represents the frictional force. And once a shoe is more than 45 degree included angle, as I told, it's considered as a longer shoe, and the pressure intensity is not going to concentrate on the midpoint of the shoe. It's going to spread on the entire brake lining surface. For an instance, if I take this point, it has two components. If you take this mu dn acting here, the frictional force will have two components: mu dn cos pi, horizontal component, and mu dn sin pi, vertical component. Similarly, this normal reaction dn will have two components: dn sin pi and dn cos pi, where pi is the angle from the horizontal plane to this point what we consider. If you are going to shifting this point on the upper side or lower side, this pi is going to change. The thing is, what I'm trying to tell is the intensity is not concentrating on a single point, which is valid in case of included angle less than 45 degree. Okay, and that is the reason why we are considering the two components of frictional force and two components for normal reaction about this angle, instantaneous angle pi. Based on this, the pressure P is proportional to the vertical distance of the element of the pivot. So P is directly proportional to sin pi. That is, as I told, this pi is the instantaneous angle from the horizontal plane. When pi is going to increase, this P is also going to increase. So to remove this proportionality, P becomes equal to C1 into sin pi, where C1 is a constant. Now this pi can be either the shoe is very less, say for example, less than 90 degree. You can equate it to the original angle what is given. For example, if the angle is 70 degree or 60 degree, then the pi max will be exactly equal to the same angle what is offered. If the theta 2 is more than 90 degree, for example 100 degree or 120 degree, maximum condition is, since it is a sine component, you can see here sine pi max 90 degree, so sine 90 degree will be 1. So that is the maximum amount of value it can be offered from this sine term. So when it goes even more than 90 degree, we can consider that as an equal to 90 degree. So when theta 2 is more than 90 degree, you can simply equate it as theta max is equal to 90 degree because the value maximum it can offer is 1. So sine 90 is 1. So that's what I given here. So P max equal to C1 into sine pi max. When you equate these two, equating the constants, P is equal to P max into sine pi divided by sine pi max. So this gives the actual amount of pressure intensity what we can calculate for the corresponding instantaneous angle. When this theta varies, this P is also going to vary. Sorry. Now coming for the normal reaction. So the normal reaction is what? Pressure multiplied by the area. So pressure is P max into sine pi divided by sine pi max. So P max into sine pi divided by sine pi max multiplied by area. Area is L into W. L is, as I already told, R into d pi. So R into d pi multiplied by W. So this refers to L into W. So area multiplied by pressure will give you the normal reaction dN. Now, since we have two different components here, one is frictional force, another one is normal reaction, and both are not concentrating on the single point, I'm going to calculate two types of moments. One is moment for the frictional force, another one is moment for the normal reaction. Moment for the frictional force is given by the notation mf. Moment for the normal reaction is given by the notation mn. So first let us calculate the moment of the frictional force. The moment mf of the frictional force mu into dn about the pivot point is this mn is the moment of the normal reaction, okay, which is again calculated by means of integrating between the limits theta 1 to theta 2. You will get this. Then last coming for torque, braking torque. So braking torque equal to frictional force multiplied by the radius of the breakdown. So since it is a long shoe, so we should calculate it from the limits theta 1 to theta 2. That's why I'm integrating it. So integration of frictional force mu into dn is the frictional force multiplied by r is the radius of the breakdown. So integration of mu dn into r will give you the total amount of braking torque. So you can integrate between the limits theta 1 to theta 2 after substituting all these terms dn. Then if you integrate, you will get the braking torque. So this is the braking torque. Now, so coming to the final moment equation. So here we have discussed so far three forces. One is actuating force, another one is normal force, another one is the frictional force. And since frictional force and normal force is not going to act at a single point, we have separately derived the moments for frictional force, moment for normal force. And the actuating force is capital P. So capital P into C. So here you can see the distance C. So from the fulcrum point to this actuating force. So P into C is the moment due to actuating force plus mf is the moment due to frictional force minus mn is the moment due to normal force. So since P into C is clockwise, mf is clockwise, I have given positive sign, and it is anti-clockwise. To give the difference, I have given the negative sign. So that's equal to 0. So finally, we'll get the equation for actuating force mn minus mf divided by C. The same concept if the rotation is reversed. The above equation is derived for clockwise rotation of the breakdown. When the direction of rotation gets reversed, the frictional force direction is also going to get reversed. So the equation becomes P equal to mn plus mf divided by C. So here you can see the geometrical conditions remains the same. And other aspects, the brake lining, material, coefficient of friction, everything remains the same. Once if the direction of rotation gets reversed, let us take this clockwise is the forward direction and anti-clockwise is the reverse direction. If you see the actuating force, it is slightly increased in case of reversed. So braking action when traveling in reverse is not as effective as traveling in forward. So the reason behind this concept, a braking action when traveling in reverse is not as effective when traveling forward is we need more amount of actuating force or effort to apply for the braking action. So there comes the discomfort. And that's the reason why it is not as effective and as comfort when you go for reverse direction. So this is the reason for that. And here comes the point, what is the difference between the leading shoe and trailing shoe? So before going to what is leading and what is trailing shoe, let me tell you, during rotation or during moving conditions, the pressure what you apply exactly in the master cylinder is not going to offer same amount of actuating force on the either side. If it's a stationary system, no doubt at all, it is going to offer same amount of actuating force. But in moving condition or in rotating condition, it is not going to offer. So that's what I explained here. When the brake is applied with the vehicle stationary, hydraulic pressure pushes each shoe outwards and an equal force is applied by each shoe to the drum. But the applied force does not remain equal when the vehicle is moving. In such case, when the rotation is clockwise, what happens? When the rotation is anti-clockwise, what happens? The drag of the moving drum on the friction lining causes one shoe to be applied harder and another shoe to be pushed towards the off position. So the shoe which does more work is called leading shoe. That is, when the rotation is clockwise, the right side shoe will offer more amount of work. So there the drag force which is offered during the rotation of the brake drum is going to offer an additional frictional force to that particular shoe than the left side shoe. So when the rotation is clockwise, right side is considered as leading shoe and left side is considered as trailing shoe. And definitely the amount of force which is acting on the right side shoe, that is leading shoe, will be higher. It undergoes more amount of wear, and our design or calculating the dimensions of the shoe, everything will be based on the right shoe only. Sorry. When the rotation is anti-clockwise direction, just simply you reverse that. When in the anti-clockwise direction, left side shoe will be considered as leading shoe and right side shoe will be considered as trailing shoe. So leading shoe is the one is going in a succeeding way. The trailing shoe is a shoe which is going to follow the leading. So this point you should be very clear here. Because while calculating the actuating force, normally we calculate two actuating forces in internal shoe braking system, one for left and one for right. And based on the higher amount of actuating force, we decide which shoe is going to get more amount of wear. And based on that, you can slightly vary the coefficient of friction or brake lining material, because all those things, so that it gets compensated and the system becomes more effective. So for that reason only, we should worry about this leading and trailing. So before going to the examples, I think I've given some introduction on a single shoe external braking system, double shoe external braking system, and double shoe internal expanding braking system. You would have got some idea about this, all these braking systems. Let me go for an example for each. I think which you already solved in your classrooms, all these problems. I'll just give a brief idea. So this is an example for a single shoe brake system. The block brake as shown in figure provides a braking torque of 360 Newton meters. The diameter of the brake drum is given 300 mm. Coefficient of friction is 0.3. They're asking you to calculate what is the actuating force to be applied at the end of the lever for clockwise and counterclockwise. And second one is the location of pivot or the fulcrum point to make the brake self-locking condition for the clockwise rotation of the brake drum. So here is a diagram. One is for clockwise, another is for anti-clockwise, and the free body diagram indicates all the forces acting on the thing. So this is the actuating force. This Ft represents a frictional force or tangential force. Rn represents the normal reaction, and these are the distances given the problems of 200 mm, 600 mm, and this is 50 and 100. O refers to the fulcrum point. Now, the braking torque is given in the problem itself, 360 Newton meters. So braking torque, we know the formula, frictional force multiplied by the radius of the brake drum. So T equal to mu n into capital R. T is the 360 Newton meter, mu is 0.3 given the problem, capital N into 0.15. I have substituted the radius of brake drum in meters, since left hand side it is 360 Newton meters. So the normal reaction what we get is 8000 Newton. Now to calculate the amount of actuating force, first let us consider for clockwise rotation of the drum. So when you go for clockwise, this is the first diagram shows for clockwise, you see the moment. P, you take moments with respect to this fulcrum point. So P into this 600 plus 200, 800. So P into 800 is the clockwise moment. Let us take positive. The next one is Rn into 200. So this is anti-clockwise moment. So minus Rn into 200. Then this tangential force with respect to fulcrum point, right side down, again is going to create a clockwise moment. So plus F into 50. That's what I given here. So P into 100 minus N into 200 plus F into 50 equal to 0. We will get the value of actuating force 1850 Newton. The same equation when you apply for anti-clockwise rotation, you will get the reverse sign. So here you see P into the same 800 clockwise is Rn into 200 anti-clockwise. Since the direction of rotation is reversed anti-clockwise direction, the frictional force will be acting in the left side. So this Ft into 50, F into 50 is also anti-clockwise, so minus. So we'll get the value P equal to 2150 Newton. The second question in the problem is to find the location of pivot or fulcrum for the brake to be self-locking. So self-locking condition, already we discussed three important cases. One is self-energizing, second one is self-locking, and third one is uncontrolled braking. So for self-locking condition, the condition is A is equal to mu into C. In other words, there is no actuating force. Without actuating force, the braking action will be done. So that's why we told it's a not desirable condition. So when the actuating force is 0, P equal to 0, you substitute in this equation for the clockwise condition, and if you calculate, you will get A equal to 667 mm. That means in this diagram for the clockwise rotation condition, instead of this distance 50 mm, if you apply 667 mm, that means this O goes more down. So there the condition self-locking attains, because the brake shoe is going to rest on the brake drum rigidly, where it's going to apply on its own and attains the self-locking condition. There is no need for any external force. So this is only hypothetical condition. In real-time applications, we will not allow for self-locking. So the distance A equal to 667 mm. Then coming for the second example, this example is for a double shoe external braking system. The double shoe block brake is shown in the figure. The brake drum rotates in clockwise direction and actuating force is 500 Newton, which is given here. This is the actuating force. Coefficient of friction is 0.35. Calculate the torque absorbing capacity. So this diagram you can see, this is the left side brake shoe, this is the right side brake shoe. The diameter of the brake drum is given 500 mm. So radius of the brake drum is 250 mm. All the dimensions were given. So here you split it. This L-shaped lever is one lever. Here you have one horizontal lever, and this left side lever and this right side lever. So totally you have 4 levers in this arrangement. So these 4 levers, you have to draw the free body diagram, and you should indicate what are the forces acting in each and every pivot point and the external point and the normal reactions, frictional force, everything. Then if you apply the equilibrium conditions, you will get the values. So that's, you can see the free body diagram here. This is the first L link, DAB. This is the horizontal link, B into C. This is the left side lever, AE. This is the right side lever, CF. So as we already discussed in the introduction about the double shoe braking system, I told all these things. So these are the different reactions. The two horizontal and vertical reactions for each and every pivot point. And in the brake shoe, you will have a normal reaction, one frictional force. So once you integrate all these forces, now you can apply the equilibrium conditions. Let us take first the link, this DAB. If you take this link DAB, RHB into 100 equal to 500 into 350. It is, so this is RHB. RHB into 100. So this is a clockwise moment. That is equal to 500 into 350. So 500 is the external force. So this is 350. 500 into 350. Here they are taking moment about this fulcrum point A. So with respect to point A, RVA and RHA is not going to contribute any moment. You forget about these two forces. So the remaining forces is RVB, RHB and 500. Out of these three forces, RVB is not going to create any moment because its line of action is same with respect to point P. So if you leave this also, at last you will have only these two. RHB is going to create one moment. This 500 Newton is going to create one moment. This RHB is going to create clockwise moment. This 500 is going to create anti-clockwise moment. So total clockwise moment equal to anti-clockwise moment. If you apply the condition, you will get RHB into 100 equal to 500 into 350. So from this you will get the answer RHB equal to 1750 Newton. This is the first case. Once you get this value, now again you can apply any, see, while applying these equilibrium conditions, it is completely up to your opinion. There are three equilibrium conditions: summation of horizontal forces equal to 0, summation of vertical forces equal to 0, summation of moments equal to 0. You can apply any of these conditions to solve the unknown forces. There is no issue at all. Our ultimate objective is to calculate the reactions. You can apply forces first, then moment, or you can apply moment first and then forces. So there is no issue at all. And there is no rigid rule also for this. So here I have applied a moment equation first. I have calculated one value. Now I am going to apply the equilibrium of forces. Horizontal force equal to vertical forces. So here RHB is the right hand side force. RHA is the left hand side force. So RHB will be equal to RHA. Since already I calculated RHB, that is 1750 Newton. So it will be equal to RHA. Similarly, upward forces equal to downward forces. That is summation of vertical forces equal to 0. So here 500 is downward, RVB is downward, RVA is upward. So 500 plus RVB equal to RVA. That is what I have written here. 500 plus RVB equal to RVA. Let us keep this equation as it is. It can be calculated from some other equations. Now coming for the next link BC. In this link BC, here you can see one left side reaction RHB, one right side reaction RHC. So left side force equal to right side force. RHB equal to RHC. RHB is already calculated here. Same thing is going to act because the point remains the same, B point. So your RHC is also equal to RHB. So now you got RHC value. Upward forces equal to downward forces. RVB equal to RVC. Then taking moment about C. So if you consider this C point and take moment about the C point, RVC and RSC is not going to create the moment. RHB is acting on the same line. It is also not going to create any moment. So at last, if you see, only one force is remaining, RVB. So RVB into 200 is equal to 0. That's the equation you will get. So if you solve that, RVB will be equal to 0. Once RVB is equal to 0, RVB is equal to RVC. So RVC is also equal to 0. Once you get RVB equal to 0, you substitute in the previous equation. What's the previous equation you get? 500 plus RVB equal to RVA. If you substitute RVB 0 there, you will get the answer for RVA. Now if you take all together, if you see with these two links, that is a DAB and BC. Now you got answers for all the reactions. You got RVB 0, RHB, RHA, RHC, everything is equal to 1750 Newton. Okay. So you get all the answers. Okay, so with this, all the reaction forces are over. Now coming for moment. So in this free body diagram of forces acting on the right side link, let us take first CF, taking moment about the fulcrum point F. We will take the moment about this fulcrum point F. We will first see what are the forces acting. RHC is one force, RVC is one force, NR is one force, mu NR is one force. So totally 4 forces. Out of these 4 forces, this RVC is acting on the same line of action. So it is not going to create moment. So if you omit that, remaining you will have only 3 forces. So you will have 3 moments. RHC into this 450 plus 350. That is 800. So RHC into 800. It's an anti-clockwise moment. Either you keep positive or negative. The another one you keep it as the opposite sign. Then mu NR into 150. Then NR into 350. When you substitute everything in this equation, since you already know the value of RHC, you substitute, you will get the value of NR. That's all. Again, I am telling this positive sign and negative sign is not at all an issue. Once you keep clockwise as positive, you keep anti-clockwise as negative, or vice versa. There is no rule for that. Similarly, you take the moments for the left side pin AE, you will get the answer for NL. And total torque absorbing capacity is MT equal to mu NR plus NL into R. So in case of single shoe braking system, you will have only one normal reaction. So you will get mu N into R. So since there are 2 shoes here, so you have to sum the normal reactions of both the right side shoe and the left side shoe. That's all. The last example problem is the internal expanding double shoe brake system, so which I have shown here. The face width of the brake lining is 40 mm. Face width is the width, small w or b. If you use the design data book notations, it will be small b. Or if you use your own notations, you can keep it as w also. The maximum intensity of normal pressure is limited to 1 Newton per mm square. The coefficient of friction is 0.32, which is mu. The angle θ1 can be assumed to be 0. So what is θ1? I will explain you with the design data book. Calculate actuating force and torque absorbing capacity of the brake. So this is what they've given here. This is the fulcrum point and this is the brake shoe lining starts. So if there is a gap between the fulcrum point and the point where the brake shoe starts, so that gap we call it as θ1. So here there is no gap at all. The brake lining starts exactly from the fulcrum point itself. Therefore, your θ1 will be equal to 0. And θ2 is the angle of the brake lining. So the brake lining is extending up to 120 degree. So your θ2 will be equal to 120 degree. So that's all. That's the first thing you should note. So θ1 is 0, θ2 is equal to 120 degree. And remaining dimensions, everything you can calculate based on the data book formula. So I just taken the scanned image from the data book. I think it is clear somewhat. You can just compare that diagram with this diagram. So here you can see the θ1. So θ1 is the angle between the fulcrum point and the point where the brake lining starts. So since in our problem, the brake lining starts exactly from the fulcrum point itself, so your θ1 will be equal to 0. And θ2 is the angle of the brake lining. So angle of the brake lining in our problem is 120 degree. So θ1 0, θ2 120 degree. And then this C is the distance between the fulcrum point and the actuating force. So here the C is 100.9 plus 86.6. So this total distance indicates the C value. Then small r, the small r refers to the radius of the brake drum. So the small r value is 125. So here sometimes the notation may be different. The meaning is same. This 125 mm refers to the radius of the brake drum, which is small r in this diagram. And this A refers to the distance between the fulcrum point and the center of the brake drum. So this A you can calculate. If you connect this A point, you will get a small right angle triangle here. So you can calculate this A from the Pythagoras theorem. A is equal to square root of this distance. What is this distance? This distance is 86.6. And this horizontal distance. So that horizontal distance is, what is given here? Motor hiding in the bottom. This horizontal distance is 50 mm. So using this Pythagoras theorem, A is equal to square root of this 86.6 square plus this horizontal distance 50 square. So you will get the value of A. That's all. Now you got all the dimensions, angles, everything. Now coming for the formulas. The first formula is the braking torque. Here actually it is PM plus PM dash. Okay. They have given PM dash formula, PM formula, and then here you can see the condition what we discussed. When the angle of brake lining is lesser than 90 degree, you can take exactly what is the angle given. If it is more than 90 degree, the maximum value of theta max can be equal to 90 degree itself. So here in our problem, the theta 2 is 120 degree, which is greater than 90 degree. So your theta m will be equal to 90 degree. Now you have two formulas to calculate the moment of the frictional force, moment of the normal reaction. MF is the moment of the frictional force. Mn is the moment of the normal reaction. Once you calculate this Mf and Mn, you can calculate the actuating force P equal to Mn minus Mf divided by C. So it's all direct formulas available in the data book. Just you take the integration and substitute, you will get the answers. Be clear whether you have all the values. So theta 1, theta 2, so that we know. So theta 1 is 0, theta 2 is theta 2 is 120 degree. Okay, so you have theta 1 and theta 2 here. Inside R is known, A is known, PM is known, B is known. B is the width, mu is known, theta m is also known, 90 degree. So you get all the values here. Just you simply take the integration and substitute the upper limit and lower limit. You will get the answers for Mf, Mn. You will get the answer for capital P. So this is what I explained. The distance A is calculated root of 86.6 square plus 50 square. Then all these values are given the problem itself. So by solving, you'll get the answers for Mf and Mn. This is for right shoe. Actuating force is 2089.88 Newton. Now, PM dash. So this PM dash is the pressure intensity for the left shoe. For left shoe, since the actuating force is not going to remain same, we will calculate this PM dash. So PM dash equal to C into capital P into PM divided by Mn plus Mf. So using this formula, we know the values of C, P, PM, Mn, Mf, everything. Substitute will get the value of PM dash. So you got a PM dash around 0.449 Newton per mm square. So with the help of this PM dash, when you substitute here, you will get Mn dash, Mf dash. That is wherever I put dashes, it means for left shoe. So you will get a moment of the normal reaction for the left shoe, moment of the frictional force for the left shoe. Calculate these two moments and substitute in this formula, you will get the actuating force for the left side shoe. So you will get the actuating force separately for the right shoe, separately for the left shoe. Then you can calculate amount of torque capacity. That's what this. So Mf dash and Mn dash for the left shoe, then actuating force separately for the left shoe, and total braking torque is the value. So this is the end of this problem. I think I've given just an overview of the shoe brake systems: single shoe external, double shoe external, and double shoe internal expanding. I don't know whether I rushed or went fastly or slowly. To my knowledge, I have given just overview. I think you would have got some idea. If you have any doubts, you can clarify.
So thank you, sir. If any doubt, participants is having any doubt, please ask, sir. Sir, I'm Gururaj, sir. So, coordinator
Yes.
of this program, sir.
Yes, sir. Tell me, sir.
Sir, during the reverse action of the automobile vehicle, why the braking effort is not effective, sir? So, what's the exact answer for this question, sir?
It's actually I've shown in that slide. Let me show that slide.
Sir.
Here, actually, the braking action when traveling in reverse is not as effective as traveling forward. That not as effective, the meaning is we need to have an additional actuating force. So that's the meaning for that word, not as effective. We will have a little discomfort during the reverse action because we need to have to apply theoretically more amount of actuating force. So if you see by the relation for forward clockwise rotation, the P is equal to Mn minus Mf divided by C. It's a difference. Same thing when you apply for the reverse direction, it becomes an addition. So slightly you need to apply more effort. That more effort only we call it as not so as effective.
Okay.
Anyway, action is going to take place.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, any other questions, sir, from participant side?
Yes, sir. In the design point of view, sir, good morning, sir. The presentation is excellent.
Thank you, sir.
I have only one doubt. In the design point of view, what is the reason or what is the cause for squeak noise? In the rainy time, the squeak like that, the noise is coming in rainy times, sir, mostly in two-wheelers. Do you have any idea about this?
So actually the noise is due to sometimes the sliding action which takes place in the contact between the shoe and the brake drum. Normally you will have a slippery action in the rainy times. That slippery action will create that noise because the amount of gripness between the contact surfaces will not be that much rigid during any wet conditions. So that leads to a light amount of slippery action. That slippery action will create a noise.
Do you have any idea about to overcome this issue?
Idea what to say, because it actually goes to environmental conditions. Keeping all that environmental conditions only, we are taking the selection of brake lining materials. But if you see that when you go for automobile conditions, when going on streets, we cannot have any kind of provision to avoid contact of wet surfaces. We can able to slightly reduce the noise, but we cannot alter the designs to completely omit. That's a thing. We can slightly reduce.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, thank you all. Thank you, Sivakumar. Thank you, Ramco Institute of Technology, for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Sir, participants said if you have any questions, sir. So, can I formally conclude the meeting, sir?
Yes, sir. Sure, sir.
Okay, sir. So, first of all, I thank our management for giving the great support to conduct this type of technical seminars through the online platform, sir. I would like to convey my thanks to our principal sir, vice principal sir, and our head of the department and our faculty members to give this opportunity to conduct this program. It's an immense pleasure to submit our special thanks to today's resource person, Dr. Ramesh sir Ganesh sir, Ganesh. Okay, Ganesh sir from Velamal Institute of Technology, Chennai. So really, the session was very wonderful and useful to the participants, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. I convey my thanks to the team behind RIT Mechanical CAD Center. The CAD Center, they are helping to telecast our session in the YouTube live stream. So not but least, I am very much thankful of our participants for attending and listening patiently this webinar session. Thank you, sir. Thank you all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So, so our attendance link is visible in the chat box, sir. Sir, all the participants are requested to submit your attendance and feedback through that link, sir. So one small information, sir. Afternoon session, already we have planned to conduct afternoon session at 3:30 p.m., sir. But small change, at 3 o'clock we will start, sir. So tomorrow, today afternoon session at 3 o'clock, sir. We will meet at 3 o'clock for afternoon session. We have changed the time, sir. At 3 o'clock we will meet at afternoon session. So the session will be handled by our our Ramco Staff Technology staff member, Mr. Gerald John Brutto, on the topic of design of brakes, design of band brakes. சார் கணேஷ் சார் சிவகுமார் சார் வந்து சம்மத ஒர்க்ல இருக்காங்க சார், அதனால வர முடியலைங்க சார்.
Sir, Ganesh sir went out, sir. Gurva sir.
சார் எனக்கு இது மட்டும் இல்லை சார், எங்கள் பர்த்டே எனக்கு கரெக்டாக தெரியும் சார். இன்னொன்றது பார்த்து
நீங்கள் சும்மா உங்கள் காண்டாக்டில் போட்டிங்கனாலே அது வந்துடும்.
காண்டாக்டில் போட்டாலே தான் எல்லாத்தையும் நான் 92 காண்டாக்டில் போட முடியாது சார்.
கூகுள் எல்லாரும் ஆட் பண்ணி வச்சுக்கோங்க ஜி, கூகுள் டீடைல்ஸ்ல.
ஆமா ஜி, நான் ஆட் பண்ணல கணக்கு 2 பேர் மொபைல் நம்பர் வச்சு அது வெட்டி வரல. எனக்கு டேட்டா பர்த் மட்டும் தான் இன்புட். எனக்கு அந்த மாதிரி சொல்லுங்க அதுக்கா பார்த்து சொல்றீங்க.
அட்டெண்டன்ஸ் எத்தனை நாளைக்கு வரணும்னு கேட்பாங்க. ஜி என்ன ஜி நீங்க ஆக்டிவா இருக்கணும் ஜி. அட்டெண்டன்ஸ் லிங்க் ஃபீட்பேக் லிங்க்லாம் எப்படி இருக்கீங்க?
போதும் உனக்கு. நீ எவ்வளவு நேரம் அவங்க கொஸ்டின் கேட்டுக்கிட்டு போய் அட்டெண்டன்ஸ் நம்ம போட்டோம்னு வச்சுக்கோங்க.
போட்டுங்க அப்பதாங்க கரெக்ட்டா.
வெங்கடேஷ்
சார்
ஜி மைக் ஆஃப் பண்ணுங்க.
ஓகே.
டிஃபரன்ஸ் பிட்வீன் ஷூ அண்ட் பேண்ட் பிரேக். அருண்குமார் வந்து கேட்டுக்கிறீங்க, அதாவது 5th யூனிட்ல வந்து கிளச் அண்ட் எனி ஒன் டாபிக் ஆஃப் பிரேக் ஸ்டடி படிக்கலாமான்னு. ஸோ பிரேக்ல வந்து நிறைய டாபிக் இருக்கு. ஷூ பிரேக்கு, பேண்ட் பிரேக். ஷூ பிரேக்லேயே வந்து இன்டர்னலி எக்ஸ்பேண்டிங் ஷூ பிரேக், சிங்கிள் ஷூ, டபுள் ஷூ, இந்த 3 டைப்பா இருக்கும். ஸோ அது எல்லாமே நீங்க படிச்சுதான் ஆகணும். பேண்ட் பிரேக்னா டிஃபரன்ஷியல் பேண்ட் பிரேக், சிம்பிள் பேண்ட் பிரேக் இருக்கு. ஸோ எது வேணாலும் கேட்கலாம். கிளச்சில் 3 டைப் தான். ஸோ பிரேக்ல வந்து எது வேணாலும் கேட்கலாம். ஸோ அதனால நீங்க பார்ட்ஸி கொஸ்டின் அட்டன் பண்ணணும். அதில் பிரேக் கேட்டாங்கன்னா நீங்க எல்லாத்தையுமே படிச்சுதான் ஆகணும், வேற வழி இல்லை. அருண்குமார் கேட்குறாங்க டிஃபரன்ஸ் பிட்வீன் ஷூ அண்ட் பேண்ட் பிரேக். ஸோ கன்ஸ்ட்ரக்ஷன்ல டிஃபரன்ஸ் இருக்காது. ஷூ இருக்கும், இந்த ஷூ இருக்காது. ஸோ பிகாஸ் ஆஃப் அப்ளைங் ஃபோர்ஸ் ஆன் தட் ஷூ த பிரேக் வில் அப்ளை. ஷூ பிரேக்ல, பேண்ட் பிரேக்ல ஒரு லீவர் மெக்கானிசம் வித் பேண்ட் இருக்கும். ஸோ அதை அப்ளை பண்ற மூலமா நம்ம வந்து பிரேக் அப்ளை பண்றோம். ஸோ கன்ஸ்ட்ரக்ஷன்ல டிஃபரெண்ட் இருக்கு, படிங்க. வெங்கடேஷ்
சார்
மத்தியானம் வந்து 3 o'clock சொல்லி அனௌன்ஸ் பண்ணிட்டேன். சார் வந்து வெண்ட் அவுட் ஆயிட்டாங்க. இப்ப ஓகே தேங்க்ஸ் சொல்லிட்டு கிளம்பிட்டாங்க.
ஓகேங்க சார். ஓகே
இப்ப
அட்டெண்டன்ஸ்